I offer these every week along with a guided meditation. Just click the subscribe link below to be notified through YouTube when I post the latest recording. Or if you'd like to join us live, which would be great, just go into the description section below and follow the link along to be able to sign up for free. Last week, and I'm going to show a slide here. I don't normally share my screen, but I'm going to do that now. And if you had a chance to be here for the talk last week, what I talked about, what we explored, was the good that is also true. And since I'm, kind of a nerd, I think of each layer of this triangle as 10 times larger than the layer just above it. So it's on a logarithmic scale, if you can imagine that. So yes, in the world are actual harms at all scales, and from a leaky faucet that won't let you sleep to terrible things happening in a government or in a country. And then there's toxic spectacle, propaganda spectacle, just drama that gradually does toxify the culture, and it prepares the ground for actual harms, but it itself is not harmful. It's just annoying and provocative. And then there's the rest of it all. People making a better world, ordinary lives, and the universe, and then ultimately, potentially, the mysterious infinite ground of all. And I'm putting this slide here again, which is, by the way, I believe available. This graphic is available at my website in the Wednesday meditation section. I want to draw our attention at this time of year around the world and in our cultures, which tend to be very busy. There's a beautiful page I cut out of Tricycle magazine some years ago, which is a black and white photograph of what looks like a Zen monk or nun from behind in black robes looking out over a very beautiful, serene rock garden in Japan covered in snow, with trees also with snow on them. And right next to this large figure in robes is a very small figure, a child, also in robes, and they're looking out. And the lines that go with the photograph, and you can probably find this yourself in a back issue of Tricycle magazine somewhere, probably a few years ago. The lines are from the Dhammapada, and from memory, it says essentially something like, happily we live among busy people, free from busyness. Among busy people, we happily dwell. And our world is so busy. My life is so busy, and I'm trying to help it become less busy. And there's a term from early Buddhism called papancha. That's in the language of much of the early teachings, Pali, P-A-L-I. The word is papancha. It means mental proliferation. I think of it as like looking at a rainforest with speeded up time-lapse photography, growing really rapidly with vines reaching in all kinds of directions. That's papancha, proliferation of mental activity. And we live in a time in a world where papancha is on the prowl. Papancha's on steroids. It's all around. And it's so helpful to look for and listen for what is not so busy, what is quieter, calmer, and more stable, less jagged, less fragmented, more unified. What is that inside our own being, inside our own minds? And what is that in the ordinary world around us? And what might that be? In the ultimate ground, call it that, in which ordinary reality proceeds. And these deep roots are taproots of radical equanimity. Radical in the root of equanimity. Equanimity is not apathy. It is not being numb. It is prized in Buddhist psychology as a kind of fundamental core within you that is peaceful and content, present, awake, and fundamentally undisturbed by the disturbances going around it. It is fundamentally not busy, as busyness agitates around it. That's the sense of equanimity. Various feelings and sensations may pass through awareness, sensations of pain, sensations of pleasure. We can have them be what they are, we can let them be what they are, while remaining equanimous in our innermost being, in the stillness of the innermost sanctuary of your being. We can be stably rested there, even as fear, joy, anger, pain, pleasure wash through awareness. Equanimity is something we cultivate over time. I really appreciate this quotation from Gil Fronsdal, who was talking about equanimity. And he said essentially, the purpose of practice is to expand the range of experiences in which we are free. Free being essentially a synonym for equanimity in this context. It's easy to be equanimous when everything is going fine, it's going great. Okay, but what about when it's going a little bit not great, or a lot not great, or horribly not great? Can we retain contact with a place inside that retains a fundamental stability, a fundamental stillness, of resilient well-being in our core? And practice is about being increasingly able to do that as challenges grow. So how can we do that when other people are being so annoying? They get in the way, they don't agree with you, they interrupt you, they don't pay their bills, they don't make spaghetti properly. The light turns green, they're still talking to their friends, not noticing that they're holding up traffic. How do we do that? And how do we maintain our own equanimity when, let's say, we're encountering relatives that we, have history with, or who may be related to politics, have a very different point of view, believe in a very different set of facts? What do we do? So I'd like to explore the intersection of what I'm pointing to as radical equanimity. I'm emphasizing the deep roots of equanimity in yourself and in the ordinary world and in ultimate reality. How can we apply those deep roots of equanimity to talking with other people around the table this time of year? I'm going to draw on the Buddhist teachings of wise speech and offer some other points related to that as well. To begin with, take a look at this quotation from, the Buddha about what is really at the heart of practice. Now, remember, of course, as you know, the Buddha lived 2,500 years ago. It was a very stratified, patriarchal, kind of feudal, comparable society in which there were these layers and castes, and the Buddha himself belonged to the most privileged caste of all, and he was also quite wealthy in his setting, so he entered his path of teaching in that context in which he already came in kind of a top dog, and one of those people who's born on third base and thinks they hit a home run, as people say in the baseball metaphor. And also at that time, there was an emphasis in the religion of the time on basically empty rituals just do rituals that would somehow give you a better rebirth, and give gifts and money to priests of various kinds who would perform rituals that would somehow move you up the ladder for a better birth next time around. The Buddha said, no, not that at all. He said, as the quotation has it, where are we here? He said, one is not low because of birth, nor does birth make one high or holy. Deeds alone make one low. Deeds alone make one holy. And it's important to understand that deeds in Buddhism are understood as intentional acts of thought or mind, speech, and behavior. That's what lifts someone up or brings them down, not the kind of birth they had. And he threw the doors wide open radically to people from to males from all walks of life, all castes. That was just not relevant, basically, when people took up the Buddhist path and went forth into homelessness and took up the robes and joined his Sangha. Gradually, with his arm twisted over time by his mother and some other people, he opened the doors to females, girls and women. They didn't really have categories then of gender fluid or trans. I'm sure statistically there was some of that as well to acknowledge it. In any case, the point being here for us, that what matters is what we do each day. What matters is how we relate to our experiences and what we do with them, and how we relate to our circumstances and what we do with them as best we can each day. So the good news is that we have a lot of influence over who we are becoming, even in very difficult circumstances. And the harder the circumstances, the more important it is to claim the power we do have to guide our mind in particular, and to the extent we can guide our own behavior in ways that make things better and better for us, at least on the inside out. So the good news is we have this power. The bad news is we have this power and only we can use it. So we are responsible for using it in our practice. And this is a very useful thing to keep in mind when we're being stressed or mistreated or criticized or argued with by other people. It's so easy to feel like they're making us do something. And it's very important to keep claiming our own power, our own autonomy, our own strength of character as we interact with other people. That's a really, really, really fundamental point here. Now, as I talk about equanimity, I'd like to point out, too, that people like Sharon Salzberg, so a tip of the hat to the person who pointed that out, she's got a wonderful course on equanimity. Sharon's a friend and a teacher, beautiful being, and other people teach about equanimity as well. All right, so let's talk about what does it mean to practice equanimity in relationships, especially when we're being provoked. I want to first list, because of course I have a list, my 5-part first aid kit that I routinely deploy on my own behalf when they're being how they are, right? Number 1, notice you're upset. Notice you're getting triggered. Notice that you're getting irritated, your heart's pounding, you're shocked, whatever it might be. You're freezing, you're fighting, you're fleeing. You notice that that's there. Notice you're getting caught up in the argument. For me, I really try to notice the sense of accelerating. You can feel that in your body. You're starting to speed up. You're talking faster, you're thinking faster, you're moving faster, your gestures are quicker. Acceleration, pressure, contraction, an intensified sense of taking things personally, me, mine, how dare you, right? Notice that your needle is moving out of green through yellow toward red. Notice it. Name it to yourself even. Wow, I am getting so pissed off here. Wow. Notice it. That's step one. That's half of it. Just to say it to yourself, and then you start getting mindfulness from it. Get some breathing room between yourself and your reaction. Notice it. Just name it. And there's research that shows that if you give it a little word or two, like angry, stunned, so hurt, feels so unfair, you're just naming it, that increases activity in prefrontal executive regions in the brain, and it reduces activity in the alarm bell of the brain, the amygdala. Okay, so one, recognize you're getting revved up. Two, bring some compassion to yourself, a kind of tenderness, a sweetness, understanding, a kindness, a caringness like you would for a friend who's also suffering in the way that you are in the moment. Third, then find a kind of a muscular response of, get on your own side, be for yourself, mobilize a sense of determination on your own behalf, much as you would for someone else, a sense of loyalty. It's kind of muscular. It's compassion. It tends to be sort of soft and receptive and tender. It's not yet that mobilized. And then, boom, you start moving into mobilizing. All right, I don't like this. This is not cool. Something's happening here. Minimally, I'm getting triggered. Even if they didn't do anything wrong, I'm getting triggered. I want to do something about this. Take initiative. You know that you're at cause rather than totally at effect of how upset you are. Okay, it's kind of muscular. It feels muscular. There's a place for that. Okay, fourth, make a plan. Now maybe your plan in the moment is to buy yourself some time so you can make a better plan. Or your plan in the moment is, wow, I'm going to slow down and I'm going to find out what the facts are here before I just go off in one direction or another. Or your plan really quickly might be, hey, it's okay that I'm angry. It's okay that I'm a little revved up. And my plan is to honor how I feel while staying in control of myself and retaining a certain gravity and dignity and seriousness in what I'm saying. And I'm going to speak my mind here. I'm going to name it. Or your plan might be, I'm outnumbered. The fix is in. There's no point in fighting this. I'm just going to disengage and go find other people, other places, other situations that are more conducive to my welfare. Make a plan. I find so often that people, understandably, are really just like blown out of the water by something, and they don't have a plan. Okay, a bad plan is better than no plan, because at least with a bad plan, you start enacting it and you realize, whoa, we need a better plan. Okay, make a plan and then act on your plan. Once you have that plan, take action, either in the moment or later, after you've had a good night's sleep, a meal, some coffee. Then you're going to call someone or talk to someone or write something or, learn more, but you're going to enact your plan. So that's my 5-part first aid kit. Very often the first steps of recognizing that you've gotten triggered, compassion for yourself, getting on your own side, and those can happen within a few seconds, particularly with practice, certainly within a few breaths. You can take longer, and you can circle around in them, but they can come pretty quickly. And the plan itself can be clear in your mind fairly quickly, especially as you have centered yourself in mindfulness of what you're feeling, compassion, and strength. Then a plan tends to come more readily. All that can be pretty quick. It doesn't have to be, but it can often be really pretty quick. And then you take action. So that's part one of what I want to offer here. And related to that, each one of those steps brings equanimity. Mindful disidentification from and witnessing of the reactions you're having in the moment helps you find that calm center and starts to settle things down. Compassion for yourself, that tender warm-heartedness for yourself, is also a factor of equanimity. And you may know in the Buddhist model of the uh, divine abodes, the Brahma Viharas, or the so-called four immeasurables in Tibetan Buddhism, which means they're boundless, not that they're impossible to experience, of compassion, kindness, happiness for others, and equanimity. They all can work together. So happiness for others or compassion or kindness can be factors of your own equanimity, and your own equanimity can preserve a stability in you that can be deeply compassionate and kind and happy for others. Okay, so they swirl together. Also, when you um, operate in this kind of five-part first aid kit in the moment, you're more likely to stay inside the guardrails and to act in a way that does not create unnecessary trouble that will further disturb your equanimity down the road. That's good too. And knowing that you have a plan, a basic plan, is calming, equanimity. And knowing in general that you are the kind of person who, when the red lights start flashing or other people start doing stuff, usually your increasing habit of mind is to do what I'm describing here, to slow it down, to witness what's so, to be mindful, and then to be compassionate for yourself, and then begin to mobilize a kind of muscular stance of being on your own side with a skillful plan and skillful action. That can give you more and more confidence. So like people who have kind of high level martial arts skills, they don't go looking for fights, usually. And they're, not interested in getting into one, partly because they know their own capabilities. Okay? Okay, good. Now I want to talk about 6 aspects of wise speech in relationships. Very practical. You may be familiar with this, and I'm going to deliberately bring a different kind of twist here to classic Buddhist teachings. It's good to sometimes have a plan before you come into a situation. I would often do that. If I had a tense conversation I knew I had. But very often, we're kind of blindsided or something gets stirred up inside us. And so the sequence I'm describing is still pretty relevant. Okay, 6 characteristics of speech that are wise. 5 of them are required, and 1 is desirable but optional. Here we go. First characteristic is that it is well intended. Why are you saying what you're saying? Why are you not saying anything? Why are you adding that tone to it? Why are you not well intended toward your own best interests, toward yourself? Why are you not standing up for yourself? Or why are you getting combative with that other person? What's the why? Is it well intended or not? And it doesn't mean it has to be perfectly well intended, because if you've heard my theory of life, the 2 ponies, we have the the wise pony and the not so wise pony. And as long as they're both going down the same path, it's okay. So it may be that part of you wants to really get into it with somebody for some kind of gratification purpose. But another part of you wisely has had it up to here with that other person kind of pushing you around or saying stuff that's wildly untrue, and just kind of for the record is prepared to speak the truth here. In other words, that's well intended, even if there are some bad intentions mixed up with the good intentions. As long as they take you down the same road, that's okay. And this is really useful to appreciate. So, what are your intentions? And one way to consider intentions is a lot of interactions have the quality of a game in which you're going back and forth, like ping pong or tennis, back and forth, back and forth. And you can think of it as a dance, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You do this, they do that, so then you do that, and then they do this, back and forth, back and forth. Well, you can usually often predict, 2 to 3 to 4 moves out, what's going to happen if you bring up a topic, or if you raise your eyebrows in doubt? Or what's going to happen if you, bring a certain intensity to a discussion? Then the question is, do you want that? So one way to think about intention is to sort of play it out one or two moves. And is that the result you want? Or alternately, what is the result that you want? That's intention. It doesn't mean you're being Machiavellian or manipulative. You're just being farsighted. Instead of driving, looking 10 feet down the road to the next thing that blurts out of your mouth or reacts to what blurted out of their mouth, 10 feet down the road, you're looking 100 feet down the road, even 1,000 feet down the road. What's the result I'm going for here? That's really useful. And you can take refuge in knowing what your intentions are if they're good intentions. If you're there in good faith, you don't have to be a saint. But basically, if you're there in good faith, if you're sincere, if you're aiming for the good of other people and yourself, you can take refuge in that, which of course supports equanimity, knowing your own good intent. All right. Second, speech is wise, the Buddha said. See what you think. Speech is wise that is true. Now, this does not mean saying everything. Here too, as someone who came up through the human potential culture in Los Angeles in the 1970s and early 1980s, and who I practiced saying everything because I grew up in a family in which people said nothing, in a sense, about their inner world, or little of about nothing, close to nothing. Anyway, you don't have to say everything. You really need to bring that topic up. And one thing here I want to really call out is raining on other people's parades. So let's suppose your friend, your partner, your kid, your mate says something about something they're interested in or might want to do or are wondering about. And your response in your mind to it is complex. There are aspects of what they're saying that you could agree with and join with. Others seem crazy, seem very alarming and wrong and dangerous. What do you say first? And there's kind of a broad principle that unless it's an emergency, start by joining. Start with what you can join with. Maybe begin initially by asking questions to learn more, because maybe you didn't really quite understand what they were getting at, or you got fixed on a particular word that they just threw in the mix casually, but is really not their main point. Start by joining and including emotional joining of empathy and finding out what you can agree with, what is useful in what they're talking about. This is very helpful around politics, particularly around talking about values and experiences rather than facts and policies. People argue about facts and policies. Yeah, understandably, and sometimes we have to talk about that. But values very often are clarifying, especially if there's a difference of values or a similarity of values that for various reasons is leading to different conclusions. But values and experiences tend to be safer. So what we're saying there is true for us. We're not being phony. We're not playing any games with people. And on the other hand, we're not dropping in a variety of things that are probably true or we think they're true, but would not serve the discussion, including squelching the initial enthusiasm that other person had, let's say, for their good idea. Often what happens if other people share an enthusiasm and you join in with it for a while, they become the ones who start naming their concerns. And if you do have a concern, a really useful way to talk about that concern is in the form of how to solve the problem or how to address the concern you're raising. It's just a method. So you start with joining, like what's useful, what you agree with, what you like about what someone is saying. And then if you, I'll use a current example. It's politically charged, but it's a very factual one. The last estimates in America I came across was that there are about 11 million people living in this country who are undocumented. And many of them are here because their visa ran out and they just stayed. Some of them deliberately cross the border without going through normal immigration processes. Some number, 11 million. And then we have people who say, oh, we need to deport them all. We need to basically somehow get 11 million people out of America and over a border somewhere else. Canada, Mexico, that will take them. Huh. Okay. I can see what might be useful about that in some ways to do it. And, how can we get them out of the country? How can we find 11 million people, almost all of whom are working? And how do we handle the fact that they will no longer be working in those jobs for those companies? And how could we, what's the plan? What's the how-to? And I'm really not saying this to make a political point about who to vote for or whatever. I'm just using it as, I think, a very obvious example, how-to, right? So your teenager says, I don't want to go to high school anymore. I just want to play my guitar, and I'm going to become a rock star. All right. So you could join with that for a while, but then you might get to, wow, that's really great. How to support yourself while your rock and roll band is, playing gigs and not making much money and, like a lot of other bands, or how to know when, it could be useful to have a plan B, how to, right? Okay. That's some comments here, not my normal talk, about the second aspect of right speech, which is saying what's true. Third, it is actually helpful. It's not just well-intended and true, it's actually helpful. And how do you know that? Well, one aspect of it we tend to not talk about enough is that it's good for you. Maybe you just needed to get something off your chest. Maybe you needed to discover your truth by speaking it. Maybe it was good for you to know that you're on record, that they now know, that you know, that they know what you really feel or want or believe. Okay, good for you. And hopefully beneficial for others. Here's another group who might be witnessing or watching, or who will be affected by what you say, and potentially beneficial for the recipient of your speech. But there are these three aspects of benefit that we can take into account, only one of which is benefit for the person on the receiving end. It broadens our notion of speech that is beneficial. And you can rewind the tape of some things you've said and ask yourself, was it actually beneficial? Maybe it was well-intended, maybe it was true, but net, it would have been better if you had not said it. Flip the other way. A form of speech is not speech. Go the other way. Was your silence beneficial? Or should you have spoken up sooner? Myself, I have a fair amount of regret about situations in which on any given day it seemed like a bad idea to talk about what was actually happening, but the days became years, and what was actually happening became more and more concretized, and frozen, and in ways that became problematic. So you might ask yourself as well, is your silence beneficial? And then, learn accordingly. Okay, so well-intended, true, beneficial. Is it timely? And here too, I think it's very useful to ask oneself, is this really the right moment? I think sometimes, and there's a lot of stuff about this in relationship, social psychology, people are in different rhythms in the moment. One person is kind of speedy. I think of myself, I get up before my wife does, and I'm cranked on caffeine and 60 minutes of emails, keyboarding away. She rolls in half asleep. I've really learned now, that's not the time, unless the house is burning down, to jump into, I think I don't know, something. So think about rhythms of people. And if you're looking for ways of getting in rapport with people, you know, are you becoming kind of vibrationally in terms of the timing of what you're saying, tuned into each other? Now, sometimes what we do is we realize, I want to talk about something that is kind of high energy. It's appropriate. I'm enthused about it. I'm happy about it. It would be kind of phony to talk about it in a really droning, boring voice. I'm lit up about this, but I need to help them get a little more lit up from their current baseline, or I need to help myself kind of climb back down the ladder a bit, calm down a bit. So at least we're within range of each other. We maybe not are exactly in rapport, but we're, within range rather than, whoa, way out of range. That's an aspect of, is it timely? Fifth, necessary element, in some ways the most important of all, saved for last. Is it communicated without harsh tone? And so often in Buddhist psychology, things are described through negation, like not harsh, not harmful. So harsh tone depends, and people have different sort of standards for it that are cultural, sometimes depending on the culture or your upbringing. I grew up in a home in which, my parents were pretty critical, and they were irritable a fair amount. My wife grew up in a home in which the parents almost never, ever chastised their 3 children. She just doesn't understand me. But anyway, so, tone varies, but you kind of know. Tone is what people pay attention to, especially angry or disdainful, contemptuous tone. That really lands. And so this is not about tone policing in its problematic forms. It's about being skillful and asking yourself, what are your real intentions? And if you want to be received by the other person, tone is hugely important. One aspect of tone that linguists pay a lot of attention to, as do social psychologists, is the implicit statement about power. Tone carries messages of power. I was watching a recent interview between Andrew Tate and a BBC journalist. Andrew Tate, if you don't know, is a real leader in the so-called manosphere, very intense, very, if you will, traditionally masculine. And the person who was interviewing him was a woman, much smaller than him. And it was very interesting in how they sat. He was bigger and above her. They were, I think, separated by some distance, but he was bigger and above her. He was louder. He was faster. He was just communicating in a way that just contained many signals of domination. We could translate this and into a baboon troop or a gorilla troop, and you would see the structure of domination. Well, that's a kind of tone. Now, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just pointing out that power and the frame, the implicit structure of power, is a kind of tone to pay attention to. That's why sometimes it's very skillful when it's done with good intent for people who come in with privilege and power in a variety of ways, including simply being, loud and large-bodied, potentially. Just that alone, let alone, in my case, for example, being white and older and professional and male, etc., to deliberately do things to try to level up the power structure, such as asking for advice from someone, which lowers you in the power hierarchy. So paying attention to tone, including power. Then we have the 6th optional and desirable but optional characteristic. Speech is wise when it is wanted. And it's very interesting that the Buddha pulled this one out. And there are passages that have come down to us 2,500 years later from his early teachings where people would roll in, and you could just tell he had it up to here with them, and he was just laying it out. They didn't want to hear it. They were squirming, undoubtedly, but he felt it was wise to call them out, name what was happening here. You're here, some argumentative Brahmin of the age, just to kind of prove your point and score with your followers. And I'm not interested in any of that. I want to know, are you happy? Are you helping other people be happy? Or are you creating more suffering for yourself and others? That's what I'm about. Stuff like that, including phrases like, I love this one, oh, foolish man. Now, the language of early Buddhism is totally gendered, male, so you can translate that as, oh, foolish person. But he was willing to call people out as foolish. They didn't want to hear it, but he felt it was wise and right to say it. So it's a real question. Do they really want to hear it? And sometimes they really don't. And, it's better to just let that go by. Hold your, bide your time, reflect on it. Maybe there's a time in the future when they might want to hear it, or things might build up to a point that whether they want to hear it or not, you're going to say it. And then sometimes you deliberately know that they don't want to hear it, but you are really going to say it. And you take into account that they don't want to hear it. I had my 5-part, because I have a list, the 5-part first aid kit. And then we have the 6-part wise speech. Okay. 5-part first aid kit. Notice when you're getting rattled. Be mindful of it. 2, be compassionate for yourself because it hurts in some ways. We don't like it. It's stressful. It's pressured. It's not calm, loving happiness. 3, get on your own side. Not against others, but mobilize a kind of stance that you matter and you're here to help yourself have as good as a life as possible, which takes into account being of benefit and taking into account others. 4th, you make a plan. What am I going to do? What do I want to say next? What's my purpose here? Looking 3, 4, 5 moves ahead, what are my aims? And how do I intend to accomplish them? What's my priority? What's the most important thing? I'm getting hijacked by really trivial, reactive stuff. What's the prize? The main line of my game. Can I deliberately let this go? Can I, quote unquote, lose battles to win a war? Make a plan and then enact your plan, if it's only inside your own mind. Okay, that's 5 there. Over here, quick summary. We have classic right speech. It's one of the 8 elements of the Noble Path in Buddhism. Wise speech or right speech. Speech is wise or right, as they say, if it is well-intended, true, actually beneficial, timely, delivered with appropriate tone, not screaming, yelling, throwing bricks through windows, and ideally wanted. Okay? And all of that, coming back as I finish here, all of that relates to equanimity. Equanimity is both a cause of wise speech and a result of wise speech in a beautiful positive cycle, an upward spiral. And there are different factors of equanimity. Classically, insight into the impermanence and emptiness of experiences is a factor of equanimity. Also, internalizing experiences of needs met enough in the moment, in the present, is a factor of equanimity because it withdraws fuel from the fires of craving to feel that your needs are met enough in the moment. And that's a major point that I teach a lot about. And then also, what I've named here, a sense of what is underneath it all. What is stable? What is stillness? What is undisturbed? What is unbusy, unbound, unborn, and undying, potentially, underneath it all? To the extent you can have a sense of contact with that, that's the deepest root. Radical means root. That's the deepest root of radical equanimity. You can get in touch with that too. And all that can help you in how you interact with others and how you speak, when the oatmeal starts to fly.